The problem with headlines like this is they promise a level of drama that reality simply doesn't support. There was no verified closed meeting where lines were crossed, no evidence of any mafia, and definitely no moment where Caitlin Clark destroyed Paige Bueckers in the way people imagine. What actually exists is something far more interesting and far more real. A growing spotlight on women's basketball, fueled by competitive greatness, media narratives, and fans who are eager to turn every interaction into a rivalry. Caitlin Clark and Paige Bueckers are two of the biggest names in the sport, and their journeys have been very different. Clark built a reputation on volume, scoring, deep shooting range, and an aggressive high-usage style that forces defenses to stretch to their limits. Bueckers, on the other hand, became known for efficiency, composure, and an all-around game that fits seamlessly into a structured system. Both styles are elite, just different, and that difference is exactly what keeps fans debating. Now, when people bring Sue Bird into the conversation, it adds another layer. Bird is a legend, someone whose voice carries weight in basketball discussions. But even then, there's no confirmed situation where she crossed a line in a private meeting involving Clark or Bueckers. What has happened, though, is that Bird, like many analysts and former players, has shared opinions about the evolution of the game, about rising stars, and about how media attention shapes narratives. And sometimes, fans interpret those opinions as shots, even when they're not intended that way. That's where things start to spiral. Social media takes fragments, quotes, clips, reactions, and builds a bigger story around them. Suddenly it's not just analysis anymore, it becomes disrespect, beef, or controversy. And in that environment, it's easy to paint Clark as someone firing back or destroying critics, even when she hasn't said anything directly. In reality, Caitlin Clark has handled attention in a pretty consistent way. She plays her game, answers questions when asked, and keeps the focus mostly on basketball. When criticism comes, whether it's about her shot selection, turnovers, or defensive effort, she tends to respond through performance rather than words. That's been her pattern going all the way back to college. Paige Bueckers operates in a similar space of professionalism. She's dealt with injuries, expectations, and constant comparisons, yet she rarely engages in public back and forth. Her focus has been on returning to form, leading her team, and proving her value through consistency and leadership. So when people try to frame this as Clark versus Bueckers, or as some kind of feud involving Sue Bird, they're really projecting what they want to see rather than what's actually happening. The truth is, there's no documented clash, no heated exchange, and no moment where Clark destroys anyone off the court. What is happening is a shift in how women's basketball is covered and consumed. That sport is growing rapidly. And with that growth comes a new kind of attention, one that thrives on storylines, rivalries, and dramatic framing. Fans want heroes and villains, winners and losers, statements and responses. And sometimes, the reality doesn't fit that mold, so it gets exaggerated until it does. If anything, the relationship between players like Clark and Bueckers is more about mutual impact than conflict. They've both pushed the game forward in different ways. Clark has drawn massive viewership with her scoring explosions and fearless style. Bueckers has brought a level of polish and efficiency that reminds people of classic guard play while still adapting to the modern game. And Sue Bird. She represents the bridge between generations. Her perspective isn't about tearing players down, it's about understanding where the game has been and where it's going. When she speaks, it's usually in that context, not as someone trying to create controversy, but as someone analyzing trends. So instead of a dramatic destruction, what you really have is a moment where narratives collided. Fans took comments, comparisons, and expectations and turned them into something bigger. That doesn't mean there's no tension. At Alcom to Shane naturally creates it, but it's not the kind of personal feud that headlines suggest. If you look closely, the real story is actually more compelling. It's about how quickly the spotlight has intensified. It's about how players are now not just athletes but central figures in a constantly running conversation. Every performance, every quote, every interaction gets dissected and amplified. And in that environment, staying grounded becomes part of the challenge. Clark has done that by leaning into her strengths and accepting the criticism that comes with her style. Bueckers has done it by maintaining composure and focusing on team success. Bird has done it by offering insight without getting pulled into unnecessary drama. So no, there wasn't a moment where Caitlin Clark destroyed Paige Bueckers and a supposed Yukon Mafia after Sue Bird crossed a line. What happened instead is something much more real. The collision of talent, attention, and storytelling in a sport that's growing faster than ever. And honestly, that's the kind of story that doesn't need exaggeration to be interesting.